Yeah, this is let me screen marker. Okay, this is Necessity of Identity in Tarski's T-schema by Alex Blum in Philosophical Investigations. So what is the T-schema real briefly? Let's see if we can, this is so short, maybe we'll just read it. Okay, this correspond. So we show that the thesis of the necessity of identity in Tarski's T-schema cannot both be true. Oh my god. T-schema just says, look, if you got a formula in... Man, I can't even. Like, I literally can't even. Let's see. Where T-schema? T-schema says... Actually. Phi implies phi. Okay. So this is the formula. It says... box phi implies phi. Now, if you can think of this in T-schema as something to do with truth. So if what you have here is like the box implies if something is true, then you can just state the thing. So like if I'm saying it's true that Nogre is broadcasting right now, then you could just say Nogre is broadcasting right now. The truth, the saying it is true that Nogre is broadcasting right now, or Nogre, I can't even remember my own name. It's true that I'm sitting here right now is the same thing as saying I'm sitting right here right now. So the saying it is true that is actually transparent. You can drop it. And that's what this formula is saying. And this has massive implications for logicians if you accept that this principle is the way it is. This is a paper on logic. This is a logic paper. Okay. So yes, it's related to it, but the formula I wrote on screen is a math, like depending on your definition. But like this formula, it just says if it's true that something, then you can just drop the is true that. All right, so they show that the thesis that the necessity of identity in Tarski's T-schema cannot both be true, and a million people in logic believe Tarski's T-schema. Okay, and you can think of this as this formula also. Like, say the box means I know that I am sitting right here right now. You can drop saying I know that I'm sitting, the know that part, and just say I'm sitting here right now, because if you know it, then it's the case. And that's the whole point of knowing something, is because then it's the case. So it's not just truth. It is what's called factive modals. Things that are facts about the world, you can just drop the modal, that is the knowledge claim or the truth claim, and you just take the proposition, the underlying proposition. Okay, so what the author says is, for given the necessity of identity, it follows that A, if Socrates equals the teacher of Plato, then necessarily Socrates equals the teacher of Plato. So again, if you take this I don't know if you can see my cursor. Yeah, you probably can't. So if you take this box right here to say necessarily on the wrong thing. If you take this box right here to say necessarily, all right, so that's necessity now. So it's necessity, and phi then means Socrates is the teacher of Plato, then necessarily Socrates is the teacher of Plato. Hence, necessarily Socrates is the teacher of Plato. Clearly, in the C, the statement Socrates is the teacher of Plato is not necessarily true. However, given Tarski's T-schema, B and C cannot both be true. So necessarily Socrates is the teacher of Plato. The statement Socrates is the teacher of Plato is not necessarily true. Okay, so you're saying, look, it is necessary that the person Socrates is the teacher of Plato, but the statement about it could have been otherwise. So we're talking right now at the object level. The person that is Socrates was necessarily the teacher of Plato, because that was part of how we define Socrates. But if we're talking about the statement of it, then, well, the statement could be about anything. It's like, it depends who you are talking about, referring to in Socrates. When you talk about the statement here, so this is the whole critical thing here. Hey, I want to do the highlighter. When you talk about the statement, then that is what is what the hell is going on? Why do I get that box? There we go. But the statement is not necessarily true. So it's true of the objects, but it's not true of the statement. So okay, however, given Tarski's T-schema, B and C cannot both be true. The necessity of Tarski's T-schema yields D. Necessarily, the statement Socrates equals the teacher of Plato is true if and only if Socrates is the teacher of Plato. Yeah, so now they're saying, look, because you can drop the box about the statement, then you have to deal with, you are implying that if the statement, the content of the statement is necessarily true, then the statement itself is. Okay, from which rule K, it follows that necessarily Socrates, the quote, the Socrates is the teacher of Plato is true if necessarily the Socrates is the teacher of Plato. So this is a disquotational theory here, necessarily. So what you're doing is you're dropping the quotations and you're saying, well, look, if snow is white, then snow is white. Like the sentence snow is white is true only if snow is white. And so they're doing this in logic because you want to be able to say necessarily the case that the statement snow is white is true if snow is white. Okay, but see, the authors are arguing here, but by B, which was, yeah, necessarily Socrates is the teacher of Plato, it is necessarily the case that Socrates is a teacher of Plato. Hence, it should be necessarily the case that the statement Socrates equals the teacher of Plato is true as well. That is, the statement, quote, Socrates is the teacher of Plato is necessarily true, but this contradicts C, because they don't want to say that the statement that Socrates is the teacher of Plato is not necessarily true, because you're talking about the statements at this time. Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry. I knew I was going to lose, like, most of my audience because no one is going to care about this except for me. But you know what? It's over now, so you guys can relax. Now, what's going on in here? There are different attitudes when we are talking about things. When you're talking about statements, it's different from talking about the objects or the reference of the things talked about in the sentence. So like if you're saying, like this is what I was saying before, if you're talking about a person, you're talking about the object, the person that Socrates is. And the person that Socrates is or was, he was the teacher of Plato. That is who the teacher was. But the statement Socrates is the teacher of Plato, that's talking about a statement that is outside of time, that's like outside of context. It's a statement. It's not a historical fact. And so there are different things when you're talking about statements versus talking about objects that we already are agreed upon facts about them. And so you have to be super careful about this. And basically what they're saying here, which is not like any grand philosophical thing, it's that, and we've actually mentioned this before on this stream, that the modal operators, that's the box you can see I drew on the screen, is not particularly discriminating. And so you have to be careful when you use that. And that's what's going on here. When they're mixing the context between statements and objects, the material objects and the talk of statements, you can run into trouble. And that's what they're doing here. And that's it's a fine point. Like I said, this is not earth-shattering stuff, but what they did was they found a way to use the Tarski's T-schema, which is Tarski is very famous, the T-schema is very famous, and so they have taken the T-schema implementation of the modal here, which the boxes, for people who care, and shown that, yeah, even in the T-schema dealing with truth, that when you start switching context between talking about statements and talking about objects, you can run into problems. Fine. I agree. But yeah, it's a nice implementation of this problem. And, the fact that they did it in basically one full page, or like maybe a little over a page, that's nice. So you can, cutesy. Juggling says, I find this interesting. So this is talking about encapsulation of logic, dropping redundancy when true, depending on context. Yes, exactly. You've got it. And there's a lot of difficulties. When can you drop, when can you drop quotation marks? Like, can you say the sentence snow is white is true when snow is white? And so then you've got the sentence snow is white. Or can you say, quote, snow is white, end quote, is true if and only if snow is white. So when can you talk about, it's called the redundancy theory of truth. So like you've literally got it right there, redundancy when true. This is the redundancy theory of truth. That's what it's called. It's a very famous theory of truth. I wish I could remember. Like this may go back thousands of years, like the redundancy theory of truth. Or what was it? People have claimed to get a redundancy theory of truth in Aristotle. I don't know how successful they were. I think people wanted to give it to him because it would make him even more impressive at logic than he already was. But like, there's a thing: the redundancy theory of truth is very important. But it doesn't always work, and there's reasons why people disagree with it. And like, for reasons like this, when you're shifting context between talking about people, like objects, and sentences, you can get yourself into trouble. And so there are logical problems here when you do that too. Like, what do we actually, like, you don't see a whole lot of logic here, but like, it like that there is. Okay, and say rule K. I was just looking here. Okay, they're just distributing the necessity operator, the box.